So today I have what might be the most requested kind of quilt video ever from you guys. We're gonna be working with crumbs. So I love scraps. I have a lot of videos about scraps on my channel, and what might be the most difficult kind of scrap to use up is the little tiny ones, the little crumbs. And ever since I had my scrap management video in like December, you guys have all been very worried about my crumbs. I must have said something in the video, something like I was getting rid of them, but I assure you I was not. I still have my giant bag. This is just the blue crumbs. So I do have a lot of scraps, but it's time to use them up. Now, when I'm working with scraps, I like to choose kind of a color group or a single color or just a color theme to work with so that my scrap quilts have a little bit of unity to their look. I've made an aqua scrap quilt. I've made a red scrap quilt right behind me. This was the string quilt. I made a Halloween quilt, which was black with a little bit of orange and green. So you get the idea. I like to have a theme, and this theme is blue. My biggest bag of crumbs are the blue ones, and so it's time to use them up. Now that being said, I don't have enough blue crumbs to make an entire blue crumb quilt. So I'm going to be combining it with a little tricky cutting with some just solid blue navy fabric so that I get that blue crumb quilt feeling, but it's going to be a little bit faster and it's not going to use a metric ton of crumbs, which I don't have that many. So let's get started. You are going to need a bag of crumbs, about 60 inches of a background fabric. I'm using solid blue. You can use whatever you would like. And the link for the free downloadable pattern is right in the description below. So you can print this out and follow along. The first thing we're going to do is take our bag of crumbs and pull out a couple of handfuls. I have a lot of these solid blue pieces of fabric in here from a quilt that I abandoned and had a lot of pre-cut fabric for. So I'm going to set those aside. I really want to focus on prints for this. So here's a couple handfuls of crumbs. Now my crumbs are maybe a little bit bigger than some. I do keep small bits, but for me, I think that anything that is kind of smaller than a charm square but not long enough to be a strip or a string are crumbs. So you'll see some larger things mixed in here. So I have gone through all of my crumbs, and the larger ones I have cut into chunks that are at least 3 inches on one side, and I've stacked them all up. And the ones that are smaller I sewed together so that they were at least 3 inches high so that I could combine them with the 3-inch high crumbs. Now, not all of these are exactly 3 inches high. I didn't trim them all exactly because this is a crumb project. So as I'm sewing, I'm just going to be lining up 2 of the edges and then letting whatever length is here. If you want to save that, you could just trim it off and add it to the pile of really tiny scraps that you're going to sew together to make your next string of crumbs. So now it's time to start sewing these together, and I have a great big pile of them, and I have laid them so that this side right here is at least 3 inches so that I can just kind of pair them together and run them through my machine. This is chain piecing heaven. So put your headphones on, listen to something fun, and we'll get through this in no time. I have been chain piecing forever. So now that I have all of these little crumbs in pairs, I am going to whack them apart on my little chain piecer cutter thing, and then I am going to take 2 of them, 2 pairs, and I'm going to just put them together and send them through the machine so that ultimately I'll have a little set of 4. And maybe even do it one more time so that I have kind of a set of 8, and then maybe we'll trim them down then. Maybe they'll be long enough. Okay, chain piecing is complete, and I now have a pile of these little collections of crumbs, and they are about 12 inches long. Some are a little longer, some are a little shorter, just based on the crumbs that got sewn together. So this one's a little short guy. So I did not press any of these until this step, which I'm going to take them over to my pressing board and just press them all in the same direction. You guys know how much I love pressing open, but for these little crumbs, it is just not worth the time. There are a good jillion seams, and there's not going to be any intersection of these seams, so there won't be a lot of bulk. Just press them to the side, guys. The only exception is if you have one of these that are like two pieces together, then you want to press that one out. So just be mindful, if there's a seam, just press away from the seams, just to reduce bulk. But again, it's your quilt. You can press however you want. This is just a suggestion. So I'm going to go press all these, and then we are going to trim them into 2.5-inch strips. I have pressed all of my little combination of strips, and now it is time to trim. And this could not be easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to align my ruler with kind of the smallest little bit off the shortest block that I can. And I'm just establishing a straight edge. And then I'm just going to move my ruler over 2.5 inches and slice off the rest of that junk. So what to do with these? You can throw them away. If they are big, you could pick them apart and use them to sew something else together, or you can crumple them up and use them as stuffing, which is what I do. So now we have a bunch of about 10 to 12 inch, 2.5-inch strips. Now we can sew these together. Now, why didn't we just sew them all together and then trim them down to 2.5 inches? It's really just about ease. If we sew together all these little 3-inch segments, they're not lining up. You might not have a 2.5-inch path through a very long strip that was a clean cut. So we trim them to 2.5 inches here so that it's easier to end up with a long 2.5-inch strip, if that makes sense. So now that we have 2.5-inch strips, it's very easy to align them and sew them. And we are going to keep doing this process until we have a 300-inch long strip. 2.5 inches by 300 inches. So I hope you like that audiobook. 300 glorious inches of 2.5-inch wide crumb strips. Now I know what you're saying. We're going to cut this into pieces, so I could have just made 5 60-inch long strips. But what is the fun in that? But really, the reason that I did it all in one long strip is just to preserve as many crumbs as possible. If I was going to make them in 60-inch long strips, then I'd probably want to do like 63 or 64 inches just to be safe. And then if I did that times 5, it's a lot of extra crumbs to sew together that you don't need to sew together. So I just did it all in one long strip. We'll cut it to size as we sew it, and there won't be as much waste. So now it's time to talk about our background fabric, and this is a very easy kind of cutting. You're just going to be cutting strips, but the main thing you need to do is we are going to be cutting strips along the 60-inch length of our fabric. So it's not width of fabric, it's like length of fabric. And the easy way to do that is as your fabric comes off the bolt, it's folded in one direction, and you need to unfold it and refold it the other way so that you can easily cut that long 60-inch length of fabric. So refold it, so then your fold line will be about 45 inches long. That's your width of fabric. And you're gonna make 5 cuts at 7.5-inch intervals. You can cut the selvage off at this point if you would like, but be sure that you have 45 usable inches of fabric to work with after you cut your selvage off. If you don't, like I'm working with Kona cotton, which is pretty reliably 45 inches. If yours is on the narrow side, then you might want to make your cuts at 7.25 inches or even 7 inches, just to give you that little bit of leeway to work with. So once you have your 6 60-inch by 7.5-inch wide strips of background fabric, then it is time to sew them right sides together with your crumb strip. And I'm just going to start sewing these together with this all in one piece. And when I reach the end of this, I will just take my scissors and cut this to length. Easy peasy. And then I'll match it up with the next strip and just chain piece it right through. So you are going to do that to 5 of your strips. Just 5. Set one aside because that will be kind of the bottom border. You want these strips to go in between your 6 pieces of fabric. So do that 5 times and then we'll come back. I have attached my little crumb strips to 5 of my 6 slices of background fabric. And now I'm just going to follow the diagram in the pattern. I'm going to join these strips together, kind of alternating background, crumb strip, background, crumb strip, ending with a background strip. And that's it. That's the whole quilt top. So I did end up making just a little bit of extra crumb strip, mainly for the video here. So I think I'm going to incorporate a little bit of this into the binding. I think that it won't be terribly fun to hand sew over all of these seams, but if I just did a little chunk, it could be really cute. So it won't go to waste, and maybe I'll make a rainbow version and do like a blue strip and a green strip. We'll see. So I'm going to keep on sewing, and I'll show you the final quilt top. So it is actually the next day, but I just finished the last seam and pressed my top, and it's done. I am so happy with this quilt. I have been meaning to do a crumb quilt for quite some time, but the thought of making an entire top out of crumbs kind of was a little overwhelming, and so I love this idea of just inserting a few strips of crumbs to kind of give that overall scrappy look, but keeping it like a little bit more tame with the larger bands of solid fabric. So at the end of the day, this quilt measures about 50 inches by 60 inches. And this is the 60 inches that is the length of fabric called for in the pattern. And then this is the width of fabric, the 42 inches. And we expanded that by inserting these little 2-inch strips of our crumbs. So that gives us about 52 by 60 or so. So I hope you enjoyed this pattern. It was very easy. Making the 300 inches of crumbs was it was very easy sewing because you don't really have to think a lot. There's no pressing until kind of later stages. You can just kind of zoom through the machine with little crumbs, and by the time you have your kind of long jelly strip of crumbs done, then the final quilt assembly is just a few seams really. It's very simple. I did end up pinning these very long seams as I went because these strips of crumbs do have quite a lot of stretch to them. I don't know if you can see that, but they do stretch quite a bit, and that's just differences in bias. It's having all those seams in there that give just a little bit, and when you have so many of them, they do stretch quite a bit. I think you can see that there. So I did end up kind of pinning the ends, pinning the middle, and then just like pinning at the midpoints down to every 6 inches or so, and it did really help keep my edges nice and straight. I guess that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be back next Monday with another video. Until then, there are some videos popping up on the screen right now. There's going to be another scrappy quilt, and as well as just a video that YouTube thinks that you will love. You can also click on my face down in the other corner to subscribe to the channel. So I'll see you next Monday. Happy quilting! 70, okay, oh my god!